Good afternoon. This is Jazz, spiritual teacher, spiritual healer, mystic priestess, and I welcome you to this page, to this video. In the next 15 minutes or so, we're going to talk about the dark night of the soul. So I want to know, have you heard of this concept before? And have you gone through your own personal dark night of the soul? So let me know. And if you're watching, I would also love for you to introduce yourself. Let me know you're here and where you're watching this from. So the dark night of the soul. One of the questions I received about this is the dark night of the soul something that happens overnight? Does it last just a one night? Is it a big ceremony? And the answer is no. And that's one thing that's quite confusing about the term of the dark night of the soul, because it's not a night. It's not a night as how we understand it in our linear time of day and night, sunlight and moonlight. The dark night of the soul is more of a proverbial or a mythological, metaphorical night, meaning that in terms of linear time, it can last days, it can last weeks, it can last months. I wish, honestly, that it could last only the one night and then you'd be done and over with and upgraded completely the next day. But the truth of the matter is, it takes a long period of time, because this is what the dark night of the soul is all about. It's about completely changing your definition of who you are, and not necessarily because you choose to change the definition of who you are, but there are different circumstances, synchronicities, coincidences that happen around you that trigger something within you, that make you question who you are, that make you question your worth, that make you question what it is that you're bringing to the world, and that also make you question your perception of divinity. Who's God? Who's Goddess? Who's the higher self? Are they even there for me? Are they listening to me? How can we work together? Because it doesn't seem like they're there. It doesn't seem like anybody is supporting me. Am I alone in this world? So it's all those big questioning that happen during the dark night of the soul. So you can imagine, we cannot answer those questions in the one night. Some people can. If you already are very familiar with deep meditation, but even if those people can answer some of these big existential questions in a one night of deep meditation, that is kind of the apex of the dark night of the soul, right? Something led them to that big meditation. So it's not just that one event that led to the epiphany, but it's everything that was happening leading to that one event. So it is something that is long. And the thing is, the more you resist, the more it persists. So for the past 2 months or so, I've been talking about ego resistance and how the voices of ego can show up in all of your chakras. Well, the voices of ego can also show up through your chakras, but in that process of the dark night of the soul. So when you resist your transformation, when you don't feel safe being who you're called to become, when you would rather stay small, stay who you are, when you rather please the people around you, so your people pleasing processes are on. That's like an ego mechanism, right? It's survival mechanism. It's a mechanism to try to fit in. So when you give more energy to trying to fit in, to trying to make things work, to working harder and thinking that there's something wrong with you, so you just have to put more energy into the way that things are, instead of slowing down and listening, tuning in, and really opening yourself up to what is coming and who you are becoming and who you're really called to be. That is what is going to really qualify or quantify the time that you're going to spend in the dark night of the soul. Is that making sense? Let me know. Let me know if you have questions. I'm here for you, all right? Especially if you're going through a dark night of the soul, or if you know someone who you think is going through the dark night of the soul. Now, one thing that the dark night of the soul is not is chronic depression or chronic anxiety or any diagnosis of mental imbalances, right? So it feels like a dark time, but it's not the dark night of the soul, right? So if you're coping with grief, if you're coping with any type of those 3D human yucky negative energy stuff that we do because we're human, that is not necessarily a dark night of the soul. It's some of those things that can happen to you can be one of those synchronous events that trigger the dark night of the soul, but your coping with grief is not necessarily the dark time of the soul, unless you also use this time to profoundly reflect on who you are and your place in the world. Does that make sense? Let me know. Let me know if you can sense the difference between like a time of darkness and the dark night of the soul, right? So with the dark night of the soul, the focus is really on that self-discovery and going deeper into your heart, deeper into your wounds, deeper into what makes you tick. And it's a place where nothing feels like it's working anymore. So typically before a dark night of the soul, you are on a spiritual path already. You're called, there's a stirring inside of you, and you know that you're going on a spiritual journey, a spiritual quest. And you've probably already felt a whole lot of blissful moments as you awaken to your new self, as you awaken to more spirituality, as you get to know maybe the goddess or God, or your definition of divinity and the definition of how you're meant to serve in life. So there's already things that are working really well for you. And if you have a business, your business might be already booming or growing or going really well, and it's a joy to work in. And then it just feels that something happens. It feels like the rug is just pulled from under your feet. It might feel that it might be a catastrophic event that happens, but all of a sudden nothing works anymore. So you can't hear your spirit guides, you can't see your angels, you feel that you've lost that connection to the divine, and at the same time you kind of lost the connection within yourself, that core of who you thought you were. So growing up, you always have the definition of yourself, and all of a sudden it's like, well, that's not who I am anymore. But then what? Then what? Right? So it's that questioning. So things are going well. You already have the blissful moments. You already have the deep meditations, but it seems like it's all of a sudden, although looking back, there are signs, right? There are pointers, but looking back, it just feels like all of a sudden, nothing works anymore. And then in the dark night of the soul, you have those two choices. Are you going to work harder and continue to be the person that you were, trying to do the same actions, trying to be in the same job, trying to be in the same relationships, trying to make things work and just working harder and harder and harder, and then falling into those other symptoms of depression, anxiety, and everything else? Or are you going to work into surrendering what was so that you can bloom into what is becoming? So the dark night of the soul is kind of a process of inner death in a way, and then your own inner spiritual resurrection. It's that process of the phoenix, when the phoenix goes into fire and ashes and then rises again. Right? Nobody talks a whole lot about what happens when the phoenix is in the ash, right? You see the phoenix, even like in Harry Potter, phoenix is losing the feathers. You know that the phoenix is getting old, and then all of a sudden, spontaneous combustion, and the phoenix is gone, and then the phoenix is back. Well, what happens during this transition? It's kind of a mystery, right? So that's why Mystic Priestess School is that school of mystery, because we go into that time, that place of what happens when I'm in the dark night of the soul. And it's going to be different for each and every one of us. It's been different for me pretty much every time that I've gone through a dark night of the soul. And there were quite a few, actually. So just right off the bat, what happens, how you feel when it's the dark night of the soul, it feels miserable. It really feels horrible, because it feels a little bit like abandonment. I mentioned that on the last video on Monday. It feels like confusion. It feels like, it's really humbling. It's humbling to your core when nothing works, relationships don't work, money doesn't work, energy, health, like nothing just really feels like it works anymore, because you're just melting. It's like when you were the worm and you're becoming the butterfly. It's that, when the worm is in the cocoon, it actually melts, right, before it reforms into the butterfly. So you're in that goop, you're in that place of, you just don't know. It's like tumbling down, and you just don't know what's up, you don't know what's down. So it's just a horrible feeling all over. But when you have still that ounce of faith into whatever definition of divinity, and you have that ounce of faith in yourself, and you have that ounce of faith in your tools, so whether it's meditation, Reiki, or tarot, your rituals, when you still can have that ounce of faith, you know that this is only the in-between. This is the darkness. This is the belly of the goddess. This is in the cauldron of creation. And so you know that this disintegration is going to lead to something else. This is the in-breath that's going to make space for the out-breath. This is the retraction of energy that's going to make place for an expansion. And the more there's contraction, the bigger the expansion that is coming. So that can keep you a little bit motivated or hopeful, optimistic perhaps, as you go through all these things in the 3D. You know that on the 5D, so your spiritual, your soul self, you know that something better is coming. But when you're going through it in your 3D human self, it says, when the heck is this happening? When is this night going to be over? Because it just feels like the longest night ever. And you know that the night is the darkest just before the break of dawn, right? So you're just waiting for that moment, for the break, for the light to come back. And it just feels, it can feel like it's going on forever. So things for you to remember as you're going through this dark night of the soul. It's important that you get help, because in a way you can't see anymore. Everything that you were, everything that you've been, no longer applies to you in a way. So if you ask for help and advice from friends, from colleagues, from people who've known you for 20 years, they're going to give you advice based on who you have been for 20 years. They're not necessarily going to give you advice for who you're becoming. So you kind of need to have someone who's impartial to you and who can look at you from soul level and who can bring you out of the ashes into your rising phoenix again. Does that make sense? Because you cannot make decisions really from where you have been, because that is gone. That is not there anymore. If you continue making decisions and taking actions from that perspective, nothing is going to work. You're going to be spinning your wheels. So you really need someone to kind of having this higher perspective and give you the step by step for you to kind of climb out of that hole and into your new self, your new sense of self, whatever that might be for you. And it's a discovery process. That makes sense? So that's kind of one of the first things. You need to get outside help, someone who can really look at you at the soul level and from the next perspective level. The other thing is that you must take time to be quiet and to meditate, which is kind of counterintuitive in a way, because what we're taught in our society is when things don't work, work harder. But that doesn't work. And I think I talked about that on Monday as well in the previous video. So you cannot work harder, especially not doing the same thing that you've been doing before. So you need to quiet down. You need to meditate. You need to take a journey alone. You need to go to the cottage in the woods for a while, or go for a vacation, or go for a silent retreat, and just quiet down the brain. Because during the dark night of the soul, your ego is gonna go like 2,000 miles an hour into, why isn't this working? I'm not safe right now. This is not fun. This is not creative. This is not good. Let's go back to how things were. And your brain is not going to give you a break. So you need to literally take yourself away from your current routine so that you can build a new routine. And doing so, you also need to do that in a way that you can engage your ego, so that you can work with your ego, with your sense of safety, with your sense of belonging, as you craft that new sense of beingness, right? Because just telling your ego to shut up, just telling your ego that it's not right, and then making you wrong and shaming yourself, that is only going to dig a deeper hole, as opposed to rising you up from that hole. Does that make sense? So that's kind of the second thing. So you need to get help, and you need to find time for quietness. And even if you have a job, a 9 to 5, even if you have a family, you need to be able to carve out time for yourself to just be quiet. Otherwise, you are lengthening the process of the dark night of the soul instead of finding the viable solutions, right? So that's kind of what the dark night of the soul really feels like. So it's the ashes of the phoenix, it's the cauldron, it's the belly of the goddess, it's the void, it's returning to a place of pure creation, but it's a place of chaos, When I took 2 weeks in Brazil, I think it was back in 2011, I went to the Casa John of God in Brazil, and that was quite an interesting experience. I was just opening up. I was kind of new. I had been practicing Reiki for a while, but I was still new to a lot of those big woo-woo stuff. And so I'm going to share some of the woo stuff about the dark night of the soul now. So there's so many things that happen when you're at a place of high intense energy and vibration, like in Brazil. So there were a lot of spiritual attunements done by spirit guides, and there's a lot of spiritual surgery as well happening. And there's deep communication, spiritual communication happening as well when you're under that bubble of energy. And you know that you're not the only one having those, because when you have conversation with peers at breakfast, you know, a lot of people are experiencing the same thing. So that's one way that I was able to validate anyway, that it wasn't just my imagination, but it was something it was an experience that was common to a lot of people. So one of the things that we really felt was happening to us was that during the dark night of the soul, or in the process, the beginning, the spark of the dark night of the soul, really there's a part of you, a part of your soul that is asking for an upgrade, that is asking for an up level, because you already know within yourself that you're called for something bigger, you're called for something better, you're called to do something different in your life. You know that within yourself, and you've been praying, and you've been meditating, and you've been wanting to open up your third eye, and you've been wanting this change, and your wish has been granted. Except that it doesn't happen the way that you expected it to happen. So take a bit of the metaphysical and this, again, the woo-woo aspect, but our bodies are like a battery pack. Right? So you know that the heart produces electricity, you know that the brain produces electricity, you know that every organ in our body, every chakra system, it produces electricity as it produces hormones and the neural pathways through the whole body and through the brain, right? So our body is like an electric unit for the soul, and the soul incarnates in this 3D form. So the body is kind of like the battery pack for the soul. Okay, so you get me there just for the bit of this framework, this frame of reference. So, hi Colleen. So as your soul is in this battery pack, so this is, your body is like the machine. This is the operating system for your soul during this incarnation. But when you've been praying for guidance, when you've been praying for an up level, you've been praying for a change, what happens at times is that the neural pathways and the way that your brain has been operating, the way that your body has been operating, is kind of outdated compared to what you want, what you've been wishing for. So you can think of your body a little bit as a computer. And during the dark night of the soul, or one thing that triggers, in the woo-woo term, the dark night of the soul, is that it's like your computer, we eject one of the hard drives, and then you're being put a new hard drive in, right? That makes sense? So for the while the old hard drive is being released and then the new hard drive is being put in, then your system just goes haywire because you don't know how to operate anymore. You don't have the operating manual anymore for what you're going through. If you keep responding the way that you've been responding for 5, 10, 20, 30 years, it doesn't work anymore because you're meant to operate from the new operating system and not the old one. Does that make sense? So during the dark night of the soul, you're receiving upgrades on so many levels. And it can be very confusing to navigate. So again, that's why I'm saying if you're going through a dark night of the soul, it's important that you get spiritual help, spiritual advisors. If you read the biographies of saints, of mystics, through the world, through the cultures, through the ages, you know that having a spiritual mentor is something that is very crucial to the development and coming through the dark night of the soul with a new understanding of how you're meant to operate and how you're meant to share your gifts in the world. So this is not something new, but it's something that you really must tap into. So if you're going through a dark night of the soul, I'm just letting you know that I'm available to be that mentor. I have gone through several dark nights of the soul, and I have tools to help you because I can read your Akashic records and I can see your soul blueprint. I can see what's going through. I can see the patterns that are outdated and what you are meant to replace. And I can help you with energy work to make sure that you don't fall down into the negative spiral and that you make this time of darkness longer than necessary before you rise up again. So, do you have any questions on what the dark night of the soul is? Does it happen to you? Have you gone through a dark night of the soul? Let me know. And remember that if you are currently going through a dark night of the soul, reach out to me. Let's have a talk. And we'll see if we're a good match for me to mentor you through your dark night of the soul. I do have 5 spots open right now for the private coaching. This is a 6-month process, and 6 months won't be too much to bring you through the dark night of the soul, because through that time, you're going to understand what it is that you're releasing. You're going to understand what it is that is becoming through your energy. And I'm going to give you soulful strategy and guide you through actions that you can take every day, step by step by step, so that you can really rise up again from your ashes and be that bright phoenix again, ready to make the world a better place. So let me know if that answers any of your questions about the dark night of the soul and how we could work together. And I'm giving you a big, big hug from my heart to yours, and let's talk soon. Bye for now.